Hello there and welcome. In this video, I got you 10 tips and tricks for killbox building in Rimworld 1.6. I took advantage of all the things that we can do with the current plethora of DLCs, and I tried my best to concoct a quick tutorial that gives you the most basic and important things and leaves you the freedom of doing whatever you want to do to your enemies after understanding what's important. So, let's get going with number one. So, the basic layout is the first thing that I want to introduce. So we always have an area where we can shoot freely. We have always an area where we lure the enemy in. This is going here in, and then we have a little bit of a trap labyrinth that I've been setting up for further explanations later. And then you always have this squiggly area, which is filled preferably with barricades to slow down the enemy. I'll be explaining every part that you see here in this video, don't you worry. And then they enter the arena where they get attacked by people that are well defended, and they are stripped off of all their defenses, softened up by traps. And this is the basic idea of a kill box. This helps you to overcome many more enemies than you have own people, and it can be adapted to be applied on to various threats. So let's move on over to number two and talk about traps and barricades, and let's start explaining the moving parts of this. So traps, spike traps, are the most fundamental thing that you can work with. They work best in narrow spaces, and they have a relatively low damage, but since they tend to injure the enemy in so far that they move slower and start bleeding, they always have their value. Their downside is that they need to be replenished after every battle. If you have a lot of wood lying around, really cool, because then you can redo them as often as you want to. They can be made out of steel or out of stone. The latter is really high in construction time. The steel ones hit hard, but they are a more or less harder to get resource. Choose to your own liking, but spike traps can be extremely useful for the very early parts of the game. They can easily fight off entire raids, and later down the road they can serve to divide the enemy by injuring a few and making them move slower than the rest. This has its value up until the very late stages of the game. The other thing, barricades, which I have here, are really only doing one thing here. They are ought to slow down the enemy. I also made them out of wood, so we can set them on fire if we ever need to. We can put up people in front of here, lob a Molotov cocktail in there, or any other incendiary thing. Done. So this is where it doubles down. I would always recommend to use something flammable in here, because if you put a door here and put a door there, you already have a heat trap, which as soon as this stuff starts burning will heat up in a way that it really injures the enemies heavily. And with some ingenuity and some puzzling around how to open and close the doors at the proper time, you already have another layer of trap. But just a flaming barricade is also disrupting the enemy's movement yet again, and this is what you want. But usually you just hunker down with your folks and hide behind your own things, which brings me to number three, your own cover methods and how you deny it off of the enemy. So here we have a setup where everybody is standing behind a wall, except for these here. They are my low-range shooters, which I use if anybody gets too close. But these guys gain double defenses by being guarded by a wall. Let's show you. So if we aim here, we have a penalty from wall stops and barricade stops. And this is what we achieve, and this is why we do this. This brings us to the point where we have the best of both worlds, so to speak. The enemy's defenses are stripped by funneling it into here. The length of this corridor, by the way, if you want to be really exact about it, as far as I know, in vanilla Rimworld, nothing shoots further than the regular sniper rifle. So as soon as the curve is down 46 or 47 pieces of tiles between here and there, it's not even usable for somebody with a sniper rifle. But in all honesty, if somebody hunkers down here with a sniper rifle, their chances are pretty bad to hit the crew back here, and most likely they will just flee, and you don't need to worry about that. But keep the length of this thing high enough so the enemy doesn't use this corridor here as a ways and means to take cover. Now, let's move on over to number 4. turrets. You see here I implemented a couple into the wall. I really like to do this because this does lure the enemy to just stand somewhere in this trajectory and start hitting the turrets instead of starting to hit my folks back here. You see, turrets are replenishable, turrets are replaceable. They don't feel, they don't die like humans do, and they're much easier to replace. You can obviously work with turrets in various ways and means. You can also put them inside of the arena here and use them as a sort of an explosive. I don't like this method too much. I like them way more embedded here into the walls where they can shoot for a while and lure the enemy into false attacks. I kept it low here. You could really do entire gallery here if you'd wanted to. If you want to go deeper with the turret game, you can also set up autocannon turrets here at the corners, for example. Surround them with barricades. I'll give you one example here for real quick. So something like this, let's maybe go for it, will have a, as you see, range for the entire box. It doesn't work as soon as we get closer here anymore, but that's why we have people with short-range weapons here. All in all, turrets are great, especially for one thing: they divert the aggression of the enemy away from just the end of your kill box. If you don't want to play with turrets, I highly recommend to use animals. Animals zoned in here, so they stand in here for whatever, however you put it up. If it's grazing animals, remove the concrete flooring so they can live there. They will also just distract the enemy by just standing there. Bonus points if you just heard a couple of boomalopes there for pure mayhem. There's way more methods that you can use this, but what's really important, and the real gist of this point here, is turrets distract the enemy. If you don't use turrets, you will need something else which distracts the enemy, because it really gets hard if they all can focus down on your colonists like that. But there's so many ways, since this is a sandbox game, your mileage may vary. So, number 5, melee access. So you might have wondered what these little rooms here are good for. Here you can hide somebody with a good weapon in there and release them if an enemy comes up that has a really dangerous weapon in their palms. So sometimes, let's check out the enemies that I summoned for the sake of demonstration, come with explosives, rocket launchers, and worse. These guys are the ones that you can easily intercept with somebody with melee. Most explosives have one thing in common: they have a pretty long wind-up time, and usually they are either short range or the ones with a high range. They will hide up back in this area here and can be easily assaulted by somebody with a hammer or a good slicey weapon. This is why I implement these, and it also allows you to just bunker down here, a bit of resistance, and go shooting from there on out if you have a heavy overweight of melee enemies which you are worried that they will overrun you. So in this scenario, you can use this close area here by piping down 3 people that just defend it. They can't be hiding here, or however you want to put it, and just defend the narrow spot here. Many different things you can do here. So, number 6, hunter drones and IEDs. So, hunter drones or hunter traps are the new things that we got with Odyssey. They are autonomous drones that start as soon as an enemy gets close to them, go into melee, and just go boom. They cost a relatively low amount of steel and chem fuel, just 40 each, and they have quickly become one of my favorite defense methods. 2 things I just want to stress out. For one, they should be really kept far away from your own people, because once they are armed, they can be really a lethal threat to your own people. And the other thing is, don't use too many of them at once at the same spot, because I really had the impression that the more you use at a singular spot, the more tendency that one enemy tanks more than one explosion, while the rest of the dudes just stand back there and don't get the full impact. Scattering them up is way to go. So here I have one in this room and one in that room, and that's that. So when it comes down to IEDs, you have a really wide array of different things you can do. The regular one with high explosives is a real strong, hard-hitting thing. It's basically the worst kind of a spike trap. Flaming traps or flammable incendiary IEDs are amazing if you just want to use the heat trap design a little bit more. I don't have used the other IED types too much successfully because I found it a little bit very creative to work with them. But the Deadlife trap is really cool if you ever get your hands on a couple of Deadlife shells. Just store enemy corpses in the entrance area and just enjoy the show, you see. Very good stuff. All in all, drones and IEDs with explosive values have one thing in common though: they start destroying the defenses of yours. So be very careful, don't lump up too many of them at once, because they will destroy the walls that you're using, and due to that, use the highest HP material that you are willing to sacrifice. At the end of the day, these traps are also relatively costly, because they will eat steel and chem fuel, but I personally find them extremely valuable for what they offer, and you basically trade resources for safety here at that point, at the expense of having to navigate where the explosions go boom. So, number 7. Your length of the build is really something you need to take into account when you're doing it, because you want to have not too much of a long gun range here, and not too short. So the simplest point here, how to put this, was for me to have here this demarcation point. You see this little guy here? This is where I put somebody with an assault rifle, and this is exactly the range. Here begins the range of an assault rifle, exactly at that point. Okay, look at here. And I triangulated the whole length of the build with the attack range of one assault rifle in mind. You can, of course, and you should, of course, not only use assault rifles, but mix it with automatic guns like SMGs, LMGs, and miniguns if available, but this is a really good average range, and I've fared quite well with it. The gist of it here is, though, you want to have the shooting range exactly fitting to your guns to maximize the fire that you can put onto the enemy. If your weapons are shorter than this, your weapons would only hit, let's say, from here on out, you would be giving the enemy a lot of leeway to scatter around and do their thing. Here, for example, they would be standing back there shooting at your turrets. You wouldn't be retaliating. It's therefore extremely important that when you are building this whole thing, you should have in mind which kind of guns you want to use when you're defending that, and arrange the whole length of the build to that. This is really all, but if you don't, it really sucks. The results will not make you happy. So, number 8, the Crowd Stopper. So this little thing here is black magic. You might have already wondered, or you already know it from other videos. This steel mini turret is enclosed by doors and is not interactable for the enemy, because doors are basically walls as long as nobody opens them in the vicinity of an enemy. The beauty of it is, it will stop the enemy from running in here hyper-dense. They will have to make room for one another, because for some reason this thing messes up the enemy's aggro, and they stop piling up into one lethal ball, and they start queuing up like wonderful British individuals that need to go somewhere. It is really beautiful, and I find it extremely cheesy and overpowered, but if you want to play higher difficulty levels, the game is also very cheesy and overpowered against you, so this little thing here will make it so that the enemy will pour into your kill box steadily, instead of one explosion that will overrun you. And you can't do much about that. It's pretty crazy how powerful it is. And at the end of this video, I will let these poor guys run into the defenses. So, number 9, Fire and Firefoam. So, one Firefoam popper in your vicinity of your guys should be mandatory, since there's, for one, incendiary weapons, but if you're also running biotech, you will run into people that can just flat out spit fire, and that is very, very annoying. Alternatively, you can also use the foam turrets, which are a heavier investment. I personally am a bigger fan of the Firefoam poppers, because they are not that often required. Yes, they are quite costly but they do the job. And while you're covered in Firefoam, you can't be ignited again, and that is something I really value about these. You can obviously use, that is something that I didn't mention here, also shields in this vicinity to even more improve the defenses here. So, which brings me now to number 10, the weaknesses of the kill box. So I'll let just the guys now run into their fate while I explain the rest. The big weakness of a kill box is that it is a very, very specific scenario on how we do attack the enemy, and if the enemy does not go into this mold where they go, you know, just like this through here and just die like we want them to, things go different. We have drop pod raiders, we have breach raiders, we have so many different ways and means how the storyteller is nowadays trying to mess up our life, that this is the best solution for direct frontal attacks of high amounts of enemies. But this is not the solution for everything in this game, because at the end of the day you really need a little bit more than just a cover for the frontal attacks. But as you see here, our enemies are keeping this distance here. This is only because of that crazy little apparatus. It's weird like that. It must be in the vicinity of the entrance. But to sum it down, since the rest of your base needs to be defended against invaders too, it does pay off to distribute traps inside of your base, turrets inside of your base. Always think of things like here, for just spreading some traps here and there. It doesn't cost you much, and it does a real big job at providing helpful fallback points. Installing a couple of turrets inside of your base. It costs you a little bit of resource, but eventually you can kite the enemy in there and have some fun with that. And as you see there, it's just glorious. What you can do against breachers, my typical approach is double layer the walls eventually, like I have it here. Have doors in between here, because ironically enough the breachers will not attack the doors specifically, they will go for whatever wall they get. And as soon as the enemy starts whacking your walls, bring your squad and start firing. As soon as they start mining your structures, they are pretty blind to getting attacked, and it makes the whole business super easy to fight them back. And there are sieges, which you also need to defend yourself against, which you will need mortars for, which are basically placed in there, but this is an entirely different can of worms. In short, the kill box is great and awesome, but it is falling flat against anything that invades you from a different angle, and you should be prepared, because it will happen eventually. And most importantly, last but not least, keep the kill box open and not locked up by a door. Then it won't work anymore, and you will get breachers, drop podders all day long. Your kill box must have a direct entry, and if it is only that narrow, and as you saw there here, the explosives were too many, like I said. Anyways, guys, this is as simple as I can make it. There's obviously so much more that you can do, but I think I boiled it down to the most important things about the topic. Feel free to chime in and add in the things that you think I might have missed out or you would do differently, because I'm all eager to learn. This game is so deep. There's so many new things. There's always something new on the verge, so feel free to. And leave a like, leave a subscribe, consider supporting me on Ko-fi or other given means. I'd be delighted if you'd do so. Many thanks go out to all of these supporters out there. And of course, thanks for watching this video. Really appreciate you taking that time, and see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.